Thank you very much. Hello, Nicholas Hytner. How are you?
I'm very well. How are you? Nice to speak
I,
with
I'm all right. I'm coming to you from a very glamorous West Midlands.
you. Yeah.
Your surroundings look slightly posher than mine, as is right, as is right.
No, my surroundings are extremely posh.
I love it,
But I
and
don't have Kermit, which I'm very sorry about.
you're jealous. I can
Yeah,
tell.
I can,
I
I
didn't
really
think
am.
I didn't think the day I spoke to Nicholas Hytner it would be about Kermit, and I'm very happy it is. Um, I've got an acquaintance of mine here in the West Midlands who was a long time manager of a local multiplex cinema,
Uh-huh.
and so you're his hero. And I did think if ever I spoke to you, I'd tell you this story because I don't know if this gets back to you. Because he said the best film for his multiplex cinema was never The Avengers or a superhero film. He described his perfect film as The Lady in the Van.
Gosh, that's really great to hear. That's really great to hear. I can kind of imagine his audience from knowing that story. That's kind of my audience too. So yeah.
It's a little bit of that because he got a lot of repeat audience of it, but
Yeah.
also I think a little bit of the machinations of cinema that people don't see in that the distributor doesn't kill you on the split
Yeah.
and actually encourages an audience and
Yeah.
draws people into a cinema who ordinarily wouldn't go. Does stuff like that get back to you? Because it strikes me lots of your films, including the choral, are in that sweet spot.
Well, I would hope so. But you know, the film, because it's not my first world,
Yeah,
because I'm a visitor, so the mechanics of distribution and the response of audiences out there, no, it doesn't really get back to me. I mean, in my day job, as it were, that's that's what I do. I'm there. I can see them. I can tell how things are landing. I kind of I know what the audience is, and obviously I know how theatre marketing and PR and box office works. But no, I don't really know about what happens to a film when it's out in the world. So I'm thrilled to hear it.
are you a visitor? You've done seven. You've only done two fewer films than Tarantino.
Well,
I understand why you think you're a visitor, but seven films isn't a visitor.
yeah. So in the '90s, I thought maybe this was my world, and then I thought, no. I love doing it, but my world is the theatre, and this is the first thing I've done since The Lady in the Van, which was 10 years ago. So I
Yes.
think that so I think that probably does qualify me as a visitor.
Yeah, he's left his job now, so he'll be very disappointed that it's taken you 10 years to make this film. I
I
remember,
hope the choral behaves like The Lady in the Van. That would be great. It would be great if it found an audience in the same way.
well, it's coming at a point where there is a film that's doing that, where as much as we're told cinema is doomed and it's the end of everything, out comes a film like I Swear,
Mhm.
which is playing in cinemas at the moment, which is outperforming a lot of the blockbusters. And is bringing people into a cinema who ordinarily wouldn't be there. So
Yeah,
I always love to name check films like that.
yeah, and I think I may be out of date here, but I remember being amazed a while ago when I was told that the older audience was everybody over 35, because and I think maybe films for people over 35 are films that do fall outside of the bracket of regular, again, I say this is not my world, but the people who flock along the first weekend to a blockbuster, it's not that audience. But I'll tell you what it needs. It needs word of mouth. It behaves like a theater audience to the extent that it wants to hear from people it knows that they've
Yeah.
seen the film and they want to see it. Um, and as you know, I mean, I know enough about the way the film marketplace has changed to know that that's that's how films used to be released.
Yeah.
Films would stay in the same cinema for 2 years while audiences grew, while word of mouth spread, and that's just not the way it is now. But I guess there are films that still appeal to that word of mouth audience.
Well, I think you might just have made one. I think
I hope so. I would
we're
love to. I would love to think so.
so I mean, what is your relationship with film? Would you say? I mean, are you an avid watcher? In the nicest sense, Nicholas Hytner, I don't think of you on a Friday night with a six pack of beer and a takeaway and a bawdy comedy. from the video shop. I'm just curious where you're. I mean, it'd be great if it was, but I'm curious what are you watching? What's the stuff when you do
Well,
venture in this world?
well, look. I'm that over 35. I'm that well over 35 audience that that still reads reviews, still wants to hear from my friends, and on a Friday night, it might not be a six pack, but it might be a glass of wine, and I'm watching BFI Player. I'm
Yeah.
watching films that I remember from 30 or 40 years ago, or films that I missed 30 or 40 years ago, as much as I'm watching the thing that I've heard is good amongst the new releases.
So your eyes are always open, presumably.
Yeah, and I have reached that stage where I'll tell you what I've watched. It wasn't a movie, but what I watched with most pleasure recently is the five-part Martin Scorsese documentary on
I've
Amazon.
watched that.
It's just brilliant, and of
I've
course,
watched that.
it sent me back
Well,
to all the Scorsese movies that I haven't seen since they were first released. Last night, I watched Casino again for the first time. Absolutely not my kind of thing as far as my kind of work is concerned, but my God, what genius is that? Um, and I also, I um, I I, I watched what else did I watch a couple of weeks ago? Um, and if I was a liar, I would say this film influenced the choral. But there's an old, early Fellini film, I Vitelloni,
yeah.
which is about young men roaming a provincial town looking for sex. I thought, to that extent, what goes around comes around. My movie could not be, the choral couldn't be less Fellini-esque, but it has that in common.
Yeah.
Young men and young women connect in provincial towns.
I interviewed Rebecca Miller for Mr. Scorsese a few weeks ago,
Yeah.
and I concluded as part of my research for that project wouldn't exist if it wasn't for you. I didn't know I was interviewing you at that point, but
Yeah,
you brought them together on the Crucible.
well, they found each other on the Crucible. As that was I can't claim to be Cupid. It's Daniel Daniel Day-Lewis at the height of his career agreed to be in the Crucible. I think
Yeah.
as much as anything else because he was so eager to work with Arthur Miller, and that's how he met Rebecca. And gotta say, in Mr. Scorsese, I'm not sure Daniel would have spoken to another documentary maker about
Yes.
it, but how brilliantly he spoke,
Yeah.
and how funny, how
The
how
bit that we don't see of him. Yeah.
yeah, but the way in that series Daniel talks about the making of Gangs of New York, I found the whole thing so engaging. Anyway, yeah, no, I hadn't thought about that, but yeah, I guess without the
It's all
Crucible,
down to you. It's
yeah,
all down to you. Update your IMDb tomorrow and get your credit in there. I've got this image of Alan Bennett coming up to your front door, and I've got the date as March the 25th, 2020,
yeah,
and pushing a jiffy bag through your front door with
beautiful.
with 50 pages. Can you pick that story up for us? Because I find that great. He just turns up and just posts new
He's
things through
always
your.
done that. He's always done that. We've never. He lives now kind of 5 minutes in the other direction to the house where he lived, where Miss Shepherd, the lady in the van, parked in his drive. But we've always, by coincidence, lived very close to each other. So he's always been his own postman.
Yeah.
And he's always favored used jiffy bags, being, uh, against waste even before it became fashionable to be. Well, he's of the generation that doesn't
Yeah.
believe in waste. So yeah, that is what happened. It was 2 days before the first COVID lockdown began. I didn't know this was what he was working on, and it was and it had a note attached, and it took. I immediately responded to what he was writing about. Very much my thing. Um, uh, uh, Music, classical music, choral singing, uh, the North,
Yeah.
All of these are um, subjects that we have in common. His tone of voice is, I have been responding to and working through and been influenced by since we first worked together in, I think, 1991. So yeah, it was something to think about during COVID, but it took 4 years to come to fruition.
That's because you are running a theatre, isn't it?
That's
Wasn't
right.
that
Yeah,
the?
that's
Yeah.
right.
So you had the foresight to set up a theatre 3 years before a global pandemic.
Yeah, that was
Yeah.
not. It wasn't. It wasn't. It wasn't on. It wasn't on our dance card. Uh, global pandemic, and it was not helpful. And of course, it continues not to be helpful. But everybody I know who works in theatre, film, performing arts of any kind,
Yeah.
um, has been through it and is dealing with the fallout and is dealing in very inventive ways with the fallout. That's what it's without being pretentious, it connects us
Yeah.
to the roots the of the roots of the London theatre, which the Elizabethan roots of the London theatre, where they were constantly dealing with plague and finding ways of dealing with plague and getting out of London and coming back again. So at least we feel we have that in common with them.
So in that 4 year, I mean, a lot of the stories I hear from certainly independent-minded filmmakers trying to put films on is you talked there about it's taking 4 years to bring to the screen for a bunch of reasons. But scheduling's the one that never really comes to the forefront very often. I'm kind of curious how much that has to play. If you'd have been able, if you've been in a position, say, 3 years before, that the theatre was, I don't know, looking after itself, he says, like understanding just what a throwaway comment that is. Would it have been different? You know, would you have cast it differently if it was 3 years before? Was there a version that was just tonally, just I don't know, 2 degrees what either way?
Yeah, that's interesting. The version that Alan gave me in 2020 was it was in effect a sketch. It needed a lot of work. If I'd been wholly focused on it, he probably would have. We would both have moved forward faster. Um, and if there'd been no pandemic, I have no idea what the independent film world would have looked like, or if the funding climate would have looked like. Uh, I was very fortunate that Sony Pictures Classics, who were the principal backers, producers of the film, were eager to make another film scripted by Alan and directed by me because of The Lady in the Van. They did The Lady in the Van.
Yeah,
That wouldn't have been different. Casting, well, I think the young ones would have been different because some of them wouldn't even have been in the profession. But the principal casting of what you might call the older roles, I would imagine they would have shaken down as very much the same.
yeah.
Those older actors, and again, by older, I mean over 35, uh, and more or less all of them people that I've worked with before at some point in the theatre.
Yeah.
So and they've all worked with each other before. So I think that would have been similar. But look, the way independent films get made is the way plays get made, is the way all the arts get made. They're made off the back of the insane enthusiasm of the people who make them.
Yeah.
There's a lot of talk in my theatre world about funding, state funding, the really damaging squeeze on state funding. There's a lot of talk in the independent film world
Yeah.
of how very hard it is to put the money together to make an independent film. But the thing that comes before all of those is that there are people who are so possessed by and driven by the need to make theatre, to make music, to make film. That's how it gets made. Nobody's in it because it's a
Yeah.
sensible thing to do. Nobody's in it because they were advised by their careers advisor that there was a regular living to be made in film or theatre. They're in it because they're nutters. That's how,
Well,
because making this stuff is more important than the difficulties.
I have to confess, when I see a modestly budgeted, relatively independent film open with the card 1916,
Hmm.
I pretty much breathe in. I was just like, oh, that's a lot of meetings. Just, just you know,
It
you,
sure is. But here's something that I discovered, because, as I say, because I am an intermittent visitor. The first film I made in 1994 was also Alan Bennett, based on the
yes,
play The Madness of King George,
yep,
1788. What in 1994 you had to do if you wanted to see 1788 is point the camera uh, at places where there was no 20th century.
yeah,
Uh, you had no choice. In 2024, last year when this was made, in the small town of Saltaire, Yorkshire, there's nowhere you can look where there isn't some evidence of the 21st century. There are windows that have been replaced.
yeah.
There's at the end of the high street, there's the main Bradford Leeds Road with enormous trucks thundering both ways. There's any amount of there's tarmac on the roads. There's any amount of 21st century detritus. You can paint it all out. So at least to that extent, 1916 has become easier than it would have been 30 years ago.
Oh, but I always thought the trick with Madness of King George, or part of it, was you get Ken Adam in. There's
Well, that was,
a lovely passage in your memoir about that,
yeah,
where you just talk about, I want the guy from Barry Lyndon, and then you get him.
yeah. No, that is absolutely true. That was produced by the Samuel Goldwyn Company. Sam
Yeah,
Goldwyn Jr.,
yeah,
the son of the legendary Goldwyn, um, who he. It was my first time. I was taking all sorts of advice from him. He's a wonderful guy, and he said, "What should it look like?" And I said, "Well, it should look like Barry Lyndon in my dreams, but Ken Adam would never do it." And Sam Goldwyn said, "What's the worst he can say? No."
yeah.
And that is something that when in my subsequent career, um, was director of the National Theatre, 20 shows a year. My God, the number of times I quoted that at people. What's
Yeah.
the worst they can say? No. And very often, usually they do say no, but Ken Adams said yes. So that's how that happened.
But there's a lovely line around the time you were making the Madness of King George, and you put this in your book, and you said, knowing nothing but surrounded by people who knew a lot, I made a better movie than I ever did when I knew more. And like you wrote that before you'd done like Lady in the Van, and the Choral, so it's not influenced by that or anything but that per se. But I was really taken by, because I read that book, and I think it was Minghella on Minghella at the same time.
Yeah.
Anthony Minghella, when he goes to make Truly Madly Deeply, gathers everyone together and just says, I don't know what I'm doing, I need your help to do it. I'm
Yeah.
just curious about almost showing your insecurities that early in the process and being open about the fact that actually I have knowledge gaps here. Because the
Yeah.
fact that these stories were coming up in the 90s, we weren't hearing stories like that. And I'm just curious how, if you've always been, is confident the word, confident enough to admit the bits that you don't know?
Yeah. Well, I was fortunate in that by the time I came to film, and I came to it because um, Sam Goldwyn was up for it, and
Yeah.
Alan Bennett wanted the Madness of King George made with my participation and Nigel Hawthorne's. That's how it
Yes.
happened. But by that time, did have quite a lot of theatre under my belt, so there were things that I thought I could do. There were the unfolding, the telling of a story, the creation of a world, the pulling together of a company of actors, and uh, guiding them so that they were all acting in the same world, in the same film, in the same play. I felt I could do that, but I think part of it's such an odd job directing. It feels like a character flaw almost, that you are able to walk into a room or walk onto a set and say, I'm the director, to a group of people who almost by definition know
Interesting.
more about what they are doing than you do. Obviously, you don't know more. I don't know more about dressing a wig or cutting a costume
Yeah.
or lighting a shot. Obviously, I don't. And yet, what they all want is to feel that they are being guided down the same road together. So a lot of being a director is having the confidence to say to people who are genuine artists in their own right and genuine experts in their own craft, here's where we're going.
Yeah.
And there are some filmmakers, there are undoubtedly some filmmakers. We both watched the 5-part documentary on Martin Scorsese, who really do, because of who they are, where they come from, their innate talent, their extraordinary experience, the way they remember everything they've ever seen. They really do know more than anybody else about anything. But most of us, and I say this not just from my experience as a director, but as a producer, 20 shows a year at the National Theatre, most of us are totally reliant on the expertise of others. And it's a tightrope you have to walk.
Yeah.
If you're the director, saying I don't know enough about what you do is good, but letting that tip over into I've no idea, therefore where we're going, is not so helpful.
Yeah.
I used to think about very young theatre directors. It's tricky for them because on the one hand, if they are overconfident and over certain about what they're doing, they're going to undermine the confidence of very experienced people in them.
Yeah.
If they're so self-effacing, if they're so humble that they're not prepared to lead, then nobody wants that either. So I think Manus King George, listen, in some respects, I'm exactly the same. I still don't know how to dress a wig, and I still don't know how to light a shot. And it's all changed. Over the years I've been doing it, my God, it's changed. I mean, the massive lighting package that you had to take along to light a period interior if you're shooting it on film is quite different from nowadays shooting digitally. But I still don't really know. But at least and some of the terminology over 10 years completely changes, and I'm
Yeah.
whispering to people, what does that mean? I am a little more confident, but I think mainly I'm confident enough still to say, what do you think?
Yeah. I should note, being as I'm adding things to your IMDb page and as we go along, you are partly responsible too for a gleeful passage in Nigel Hawthorne's memoir, where he talks about the moment where he feels he had to make Demolition Man with Sylvester Stallone.
That's right.
To get to make Manus of King George. I don't know what he was like talking about it to you, but I mean, I felt for the man, but it is a hilarious segment in his book.
It's very, very funny. And the ultimate irony was
He didn't have to do
Sam
it.
Goldwyn Jr.,
Yeah.
I'm not even sure he knew what Demolition Man was. He saw the play, he thought Nigel Hawthorne was brilliant, and that was enough for him.
It's an outstanding memoir, and Hawthorne talks about your flexibility and invention there as well. I mean, he's very complimentary about even at your most inexperienced. He praised those two qualities in particular when talking about you. Do you identify with that flexibility and invention are two of your key tricks? Tricks is the wrong word. Skills.
It's very difficult to talk about.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not even sure what my style is. I certainly don't think I've got. I certainly don't think I have a signature as a filmmaker.
Yeah.
I'm a kind of film student, and I don't make films, and I don't manipulate the camera the way some of the most brilliant, the most brilliant young filmmakers do. I'm I couldn't. I'm not adept enough, and it's not the kind of work I would want to make. But yeah, I hope I'm flexible, and I hope I'm inventive, and above all, I hope I know, if we're bringing it back to the choral, what this world is, what's important about the story we're telling, what it is that we want the audience to go to. And, you know, 100 small decisions go into every shot.
Yeah.
And in an ideal world, what you're aiming for is not to have to, at the outset of every shot, give those 100 decisions, because 97 of them are being made independently because all the people making them know
Yeah.
where they're going.
Specific. Sorry.
Yeah, I'll give you an example of that is, what does this community, what do they look like? What kind of clothes do they own? Stylistically, what are we doing when we put these people in front of the camera? A lot of that has happened before we even arrive on location. You know, the most, if you like, the most celebrated member of the team that made this film is the costume designer, Jenny Bevan.
Yes.
But Jenny can work in any style. Jenny, sure, she won her first Oscar for, I think it was A Room with a View. But her most recent Oscar, she won for Cruella.
Yeah.
Maybe Mad Max Fury Road, one or the other. You're capable of doing three things that dissimilar. What you're going to want to know, if you're Jenny, from the director, is what kind of world is this? When they walk in front of the camera, where have they bought their clothes? Have they made their own clothes? How real, how close to the actual world of 1916 Yorkshire Milltown do we want to be? How much do we want to move it away from that into a film world? Those are the things that, you know, I do feel that after years of working in theatre and film, I can have really constructive conversations with even a decorated costume designer like Jenny Bevan about. And when they come in front of the camera, I know that I don't have to talk at the beginning, every time the camera rolls. The costume designer, it's that kind of thing that I feel okay about.
I won't give what it is away. I'm very spoiler protective. I will say you have the most impactful final shot in your film than I've seen for a very long time. And I saw the film last week, and this shot has absolutely stuck with me. You talked there about hundreds of decisions that go into a shot, and I'm conscious you mean, like, you know, where it's set, the location, the characters in there. But how quickly do you identify what a shot like that is? Is that kind of one of the fixed points that you know something like that at the start? I know it's a little tricky to talk about without giving it away, but I'm just curious, because you are a filmmaker, as much as you tell, as much as you.
Well, yeah. So we can talk about that shot because we don't need to entirely spoil it.
I won't say what it is.
No, but I mean, that's the one interesting thing about that shot is that from a very early stage, I knew what the music was going to be.
Oh, interesting.
So the shot was conceived and designed around it is, we can say this without spoiling much. We know that it's an eccentric premise, if you like, for film, that a community rehearses and eventually gets, in some small way, to perform The Dream of Gerontius by Elgar.
Yeah.
But it's a wartime community with very few resources and most of its men at the front. So when they do perform The Dream of Gerontius, they perform it in a way that makes sense to them and in a way that is available to them, but isn't what Elgar actually wrote for an orchestra of 100 and a chorus of 200. And I always knew that the first time you actually heard what the fuss was about would be right at the end. In fact,
Interesting.
the only music you hear in the film until the end is the music they make in the film. There's no background music at all. So, so one of the things about that final shot was that I knew it would, I knew what would happen in it. I wasn't entirely sure until it involves a train. So until we saw the
Yeah.
train, until we saw the station, until I was there with the director of photography, Mike Ely, talking about the train and the station and the characters who were in the train, I wasn't
Yeah.
quite sure what it was going to be. But I did know that it would involve what is called the Angel's Farewell from the Dream of Gerontius. So an awful lot goes into, but no, it was that when, and in fact, until quite late in the day, although I secretly always knew this wouldn't happen, Alan Bennett's final shot involved three of our protagonists on the Western Front.
Yeah.
In France at war. Quite early on, I thought, no, we're not going to do that. This is an entirely a home front film.
Yeah.
I don't want to go onto the battlefield, and found the right moment to say, you know what? I don't think we need to see them in France. So a lot evolves during the making of a film.
It does strike me you set like an Ender level boss challenge to George Fenton, wrestling the music for the film. I do want to name check him because I've enjoyed
Yeah,
so much of
you're
his
right.
music over the years.
You're right. And it was a huge job for him and a selfless job because he was working with other people's music the whole
Yeah.
time and re-orchestrating and rearranging Elgar for what? Palm Court Trio and Salvation Army Band. That's a big deal.
I mean, I was sent your intro to the script book of this, which sent me down a rabbit hole of finding the footage of Elgar at HMV of all places. HMV Studios, it says, in 1931, and it's just. I mean, the footage of him there and
Yeah.
capturing him on film is quite something. Again, I'm going quite light on that,
It
but
is quite something, isn't it? And also you have a subtext. The film touches on this, that if you know, as we now do, that he was really dubious. He was pissed off that he became so identified with what we call Land of Hope and Glory. He
yeah,
really resented it. And there he is, poor old Elgar. The only bit we have of him on film
it's
conducting his
it's
own
in
music.
HMV Studios.
He's conducting
Conducting
Land of Hope and Glory, and you just know he's seething inside. And if you remember, the only thing he says to the orchestra after he says good morning is, play this tune like you've never heard it. That's all he can bring himself to say.
One of the things that I really took away when I thought about the choral as well, and it's something I encourage people to look at, it is a masterclass in the cinematic reaction shot. For someone who's been away from film for 9 years, the the way that you've shot this, I found really, really interesting, and your intrigue with human faces and getting the reaction to certain moments going on in a closeness that I mean you can't get in the theatre. I can only afford the cheap seats at the back, so I can never see them anyway. But there's kind of an intimacy to the reaction. So I just wonder if you can just talk to me about that a little bit, because they really struck me here.
Well, that's all about the actors that you have. That's about if you have actors who are as truthful, accurate, and witty as the actors in this film, and you've got someone brilliant lighting their faces. It's not that hard to compose a shot around them and go action. But the films that I make, you touched on it yourself. That's what they're about. They are
Yeah,
entirely entirely constructed around human stories, real human stories. I couldn't do fantasy. I couldn't do action. I I wouldn't know how. They're not the films that I particularly respond to, but also I gotta say I wouldn't know how.
Yeah.
Um, whereas um, real, I hope, rounded people in real environments, and I don't have any trouble imagining a 1916 Yorkshire town as being real. I felt at home there. This is something that I feel I can do. I'm okay at doing. And if
That
you have actors who you know who 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 you've worked with before, who know what you're after, that's relatively straightforward.
I was really taken as well with just the whole undercurrent. In fact, you mention it at one point in the film, the whole idea of trying to find something in art that people don't object to, that you
Yeah,
can do that they won't object to. And it's a 1916 story
yeah,
and scarily on the nose.
yeah. Well, it is amazing how that doesn't go away. That that is absolutely true. There have been periods uh, in the 20th century where orchestras and choirs wouldn't touch the German repertoire,
Yeah.
um, and uh, we're still, I mean, all over again, really. We're still um, at a place where British musicians, British classical musicians trained here, uh, cannot find the work here, but there's, I think there are over 80 opera houses full time in Germany. So Germany is still a mecca for British
Yeah.
musicians. Uh, and the Ray Fiennes character back from Germany because it's wartime, his heart still with his choir in Nuremberg. I find that very easy to imagine these days. But as you say, art you can and can't do. Even in the world of classical music, um, there are those who don't want Russian music played. Well,
Yeah.
look, I I think I think I am with the majority in being utterly opposed to the way Russia is governed at the moment and what the Russian government is doing in Ukraine. But don't play Russian music. Get out of here. I think um, I'm not going to make an hard and fast and absolute rule here, but uh, those who make art have more, those who make music have more in common with each other across national boundaries than they maybe do with a lot of people in their own national community.
Nicholas Hytner, I think the choral is an extraordinary piece of work, and I truly hope it finds an audience over a long period of time as well. Our time is nearly at an end. If you can indulge me one thing,
Mhm,
um, as someone who's always loved the work of Arthur Miller
mhm.
and loved the film of The Crucible, there's a little bit in your memoir where you talk about spending time with Arthur Miller crouched over a green screen IBM computer, which sounds
Right.
like the least Arthur Miller thing I could possibly envisage in my head. Could you just give us a touch point of that experience, just a slight flavour of it?
It was an extraordinary experience. Yeah, that after I made The Man of King George and scripts started to arrive, one of the scripts was Arthur Miller's own screenplay of The Crucible. And of course, I mean, uh, coming from the world I came from, the opportunity to work with Arthur Miller on The Crucible felt thrilling to me. And he was, as you know, as well as being one of the greatest American playwrights, one of the great playwrights of the 20th century, he had written screenplays. He
Yeah.
knew how to write a film, and he knew what the process was and why a director might want to come and say, uh, I'm thinking that this is how we might do it. Can we look at the script in that context? He used to work in a hut. Uh, he, ever since he bought his house in Connecticut, he had worked in this hut. He'd written in this hut, God, what, 50 meters from the house, overlooking a pond. It was where he'd written many of his great plays, and he was set up there. We're talking now in 1995 with an early IBM computer with the green lettering, and we spent days with him taking apart the crucible, for goodness sake.
By
It's
God.
like he's taking
By
apart
God.
some insignificant story and putting it back together again. It was surreal. It was absolutely surreal.
I've now got an image of Arthur Miller swearing as an IBM doesn't save his work, bashing the thing as he takes apart one of the classic plays of my lifetime.
Yes,
That's
yeah,
one.
in a way that only the person who wrote that play could have taken it apart. Yeah.
Can I quickly name check Centre Stage just before I log off? Because no one seems to talk to you about that. And I've always really enjoyed that film. And Nicholas Hytner, I think our time is up. So thank you so much for your time and the very best with the Choral. I look forward to more films in 9 years if we meet back here.
If I'm still around in 9 years, I hope so.
I will find a way to keep you going.
Thank you very, very much.
This has been a real delight. Thank you so much. And thank you to everyone who set this up. It's much appreciated.
Thank you.
Thank you.